Hey guys, I guess I should start from the beginning. So last October, I had a lung collapse on my right lung. It required a hospital stay of 4 days. They didn't choose to do a chest tube because while the collapse was there, it wasn't as large as they would have needed it to be to get the chest tube. So that was 4 days, and it happened to coincide with my menstrual cycle. So then I was told that it would be a while of pain, maybe a month of residual pain, but that I'd be okay. So November came, and I went to my follow-up appointment, and my lung was practically okay. I had chest pain again when I got my period, but I just thought that it was that residual pain that they had mentioned. December came around, I got my period, and sure enough, the next day, the same symptoms began. And I was so convinced this time that my lung had collapsed again that I went to the pulmonologist, and they did another x-ray, and they told me, "You're fine." What I had been worried about was me having some sort of PTSD from the lung collapse, which I didn't think in my particular case it was that traumatizing that I would have done that. So I just had been telling myself, maybe I'm stressed then. Pain would be the middle of my chest. It would be my back shoulder. It would be my right side. But particularly the pain that I was feeling was my diaphragm. And that's the muscle that helps you with your breathing, which is, it's right below the lungs. So that's where my pain was, but I hadn't given it a lot of thought, nor did I give it a lot of thought that it was happening while I was on my period. So January came, and as did my fourth menstrual cycle in this span of this event. And the symptoms started once again on the second day of my menstrual cycle. I was short of breath. I couldn't even do my job. A 30-minute therapy session was getting me exhausted from talking after 10 minutes. Picking up my kids from different classrooms was exhausting. Eating was exhausting. I just felt exhausted. And then around the third day of my period is when I started getting this particular chest pain right here. And so I went to my primary care physician this time. She's a wonderful doctor. And I went to her, and she checked me out. She said, something doesn't seem right. We're going to order an x-ray just to be on the safe side. Don't think it's residual pain. You're young. You're healthy. You should be fine. She did blood work to rule out infection. The blood work came out fine. She gave me a muscle relaxer because at that point I had been Googling muscle pain, diaphragm pain and back pain. And so I thought it was muscular. So after a conversation with her, she's like, let's try a muscle relaxer and we'll see how it goes. And so I had gotten the order for the chest x-ray that day, but I wasn't able to do it because their x-ray machine was broken. So I had to go the next day to a different location. That night, when I took the muscle relaxer, I was like, awesome. I'm going to sleep. Every time my cycle came, I was not sleeping because I could not lay down flat, right? So, I had to be propped up with pillows. And who, successfully sleeps sitting up, right? Well, not me. So that night being the worst night of the pain, right? I'm texting my best friends, and I'm telling them, man, what are the chances that every time I've been on my period the last 4 months, I'm getting this chest pain? I just thought it was really crappy luck. So my best friend, she sends me a screenshot, and she's literally said, I think this is you. And I read it, and it said diaphragmatic endometriosis. And I literally was like, what the heck is that? So I Googled it. The condition, often happens in a woman's reproductive tract, her uterus, ovaries, the whole 9 yards. But in some rare cases, it can affect your diaphragm. And you would get a flare-up with every period. And in a very small percentage of women with this condition that's already relatively rare, they get lung collapses primarily on the right side. And at this point, I am shaking, I am crying, and I'm like, this is me. Next day, I get an x-ray done, and they call me from the x-ray. It was after hours, so they couldn't reach my doctor, so they called me instead. And they notified me that I had another lung collapse. And it was small, but that I still needed to follow my doctor's advice, which originally the pulmonologist had told me to go to the hospital had this happen again. So I went to the hospital, I called ahead, they were waiting for me. And at this point, I'm relaying the last 4 months of my life. And I'm like, this is insane. October, I had a lung collapse. November, the symptoms came again. December, the symptoms came again. January, the symptoms came again. And I had another lung collapse. Like at this point, it was a 50-50 chance that February's period was going to give me a lung collapse. And so I go to the ER. I tell them everything and I say, hey, listen, you know, this happens every time I'm on my period for the last 4 months. And they were all male doctors, and they all but laughed at me. They were kind of like, period pain presents a little different. And I'm like, I've had my period since I was 10. I'm pretty sure I know at this point, 15 years later, what to expect. They were saying like, you know, that doesn't really happen. Like your period wouldn't really cause your symptoms. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. My best friend Googled and she found this and I said, listen, I'm not like, listen, I know WebMD is an issue, right, for doctors. I get that. I had this particular set of symptoms and it just so happened to fit this bill once I read it. And so I told them the condition. They said that they had never heard of it and that in their 20-something years, they had never seen a patient with anything of the sort. And I was telling them, like, I understand that, but get that this condition is not common. So chances are, like, it's okay that you've never heard of it because it's so rare. Like, I wasn't trying to, like, make them feel inferior. I was just like, here's a piece of information. Help me figure out if this is it. Like, I wasn't being rude. I was just like, I needed an answer and I needed someone to believe me. And then I told a woman doctor who finally came in, and she kind of shrugged me off as well, but they admitted me. Why? Because, you know, doctor's orders. So the next day, I get a lovely resident. He comes into the room, and at this point, I knew that if I said that I had Googled it or that my best friend had Googled it, they wouldn't take me seriously. So I made up that I had like a family doctor who had suggested it, rare cases, not a lot of doctors know about it. And that's how I presented it to this resident. And he proceeded to turn around. And as I was telling him, like, this is happening with my menstrual cycle, these are my symptoms, he turns around and looks at my mom and says, Mom, would you describe your daughter as, like, irrational during her period? And if you know me, you know that that practically was like dropping a nuclear bomb in my brain. And I had some choice words for him. And I basically told him to look it up after I did my whole spiel about feminism, right? And he came back 15 minutes later with his tail between his legs and in his way apologized by saying that he thought I was right. So I'm editing the video and I just wanted to add that resident, after the first exchange happened, when he did come back and his form of apology, he stepped up and he fought and advocated for me with his attending and the other residents, so that I didn't have to. Like, it wasn't another person that I had to convince with my story. He had research, and he brought it up to them. So he definitely made up for it. And yeah, so everything going past that, our initial 2 encounters
was positive. So I just wanted to add
and that he was going to tell his attending, and they were going to come up with a plan of action, right? So this would have been, so I went in, and then it was like the next morning. So about an hour or two later, in comes in 4 residents and an attending. And the attending was this amazing hospitalist. And he said, hey, listen, I took a look, and I think this is pretty spot on. He basically chewed out his residents, for lack of a better word, put him on the spot, and was like, sometimes, you know, our patients teach us. Doctor means to teach. Just like they teach patients, patients teach us, or teach them. And so he said, we're going to talk to your pulmonologist, and we're going to see what they think. So then a pulmonologist that wasn't mine, but it was like in the same practice, came, and they basically shrugged me off. And they were like, well, it could be, but, you know, I wanted to admit that, like, either they had never heard of it, or they had never seen a case, or anything like that. So this attending was, like, pushing. And then one pulmonologist that saw me, like, on a different day was like, maybe it could be, but it's very rare. And at that point, the doctors weren't on the same page, and that attending fought tooth and nail until they all kind of met up together. So he had asked for a consult from a cardiothoracic surgeon, and the Grey's Anatomy freak in me was dying because I said, I don't want anybody that's not Christina Yang. So in comes this cardiothoracic surgeon, and he tells my doctor that they would have to do a thoracoscopy to confirm, and this whole 9 yards. He explained to me that fixing my lung, if I didn't have this condition, could lead into like long-term consequences, not consequences, but like side effects. So like he didn't really know if the risks of the procedure were going to outweigh the benefits, because he wasn't 100% on board with everything. So he ordered a consult from a gynecologist. She sat down, she listened to everything, she ordered tests, ordered ultrasounds. She said, you know, I don't think that you have it in your pelvis, in your, you know, reproductive tract. But she said that she had seen a case where endometriosis ended up in the brain of a woman. So she said, I believe you. I think this is pretty spot on, and I'm going to recommend to the surgeon that he proceed with the surgeries to confirm. So after 4 days, right, of being in the hospital, my doctors were finally on the same page. Everyone believed me. I wasn't crazy, you know, and let me tell you, like, I owe my best friend so much, because had she not Googled what she Googled, I probably still would not have an answer, and I would be anticipating February's menstrual cycle, scared out of my mind. And so the next day, they did the procedure on a Tuesday morning. Pleurodesis, they essentially fixed my lung. My lung collapsed, and they adhered my lung to my chest wall. And then I got the thoracoscopy, which is where they went in with cameras, and they went down to my diaphragm, and they found endometriosis tissue, about a quarter, a little bit more than a quarter. And they removed it. They repaired that part of the diaphragm, repaired my lung. I got the procedures done. I was in the hospital for an additional 4 days. I had a chest tube sticking out for 3 of those 4 days after the procedure. Endometriosis can affect other parts of the female body. I had no idea. But I got the diagnosis. And so hearing, it was a double-edged sword, right? Like, I was glad that I had an answer, but I was feeling so sad that I even had something in the first place. So it was like a bittersweet moment. So in terms of course of treatment, the pleurodesis hopefully is going to help me not to collapse my lung again. With every procedure, there's still a risk that it could collapse, and my risk is slightly greater because I have this particular condition, but hopefully I'll be okay. I'll be okay. And so, in terms of the actual endometriosis that was causing me the rest of my pain, they took it out, but as we know, endometriosis can grow back. So I have to go on a form of birth control to essentially balance out my hormones in the hopes that the endometriosis slows down and doesn't give me any more flare-ups. I was on pills for 7 years, and during that 7 years, I had no symptoms. I think my first flare-up was in 2018, in December of 2018, because I had my period logs and I was feeling that same set of symptoms, but I was just attributing it to like stomach pain because it was in my lower right, like right underneath my lung. So I thought it was like my appendix or my gallbladder or something. And then I was attributing to like acid reflux as to why I couldn't lay down, and etc. And so they gave me the Depo shot, and the Depo shot will curve my period hopefully for 3 months. And that gives me 3 months to see my gynecologist and come up with a plan as to like what birth control method we're gonna use. So that is my journey with diaphragmatic endometriosis. It's relatively rare, and I just want to say that you know your body better than anybody else. And like was always taught from a young age, like don't lie about your health, because then if something's wrong, no one's gonna believe you. And I advocated for myself when no one took me seriously in the beginning. And like maybe it was my mistake. Maybe I should have mentioned it my first hospital visit that I was on my period, but you know, correlation doesn't equal causation, so I never thought to mention it. Especially women. Like, I cannot say that enough. Don't let any man, any doctor, man, female, whatever, because way too often females, particularly females of color, particularly African American female, get disregarded, get misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, because no one wants to hear our cries. Everybody thinks we cry wolf. So just advocate for yourself and just wait until that one doctor believes you, because someone will listen and your concerns are valid. And honestly, tell your family and friends, because again, like had I not said what I said to my best friend, she would have never Googled it. I would have probably not gotten answers. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you to everyone who reached out to me in social media, because I've been posting updates. People were concerned. I have friends and coworkers, and they were asking me how I was and where I was. So it was just a good way to connect with the people that were constantly asking how I was, you know, because obviously through text and stuff, but just, you know, I have a lot of people, thankfully, like I'm blessed that have messaged me and words of encouragement, have visited me. You know, I have a pillow. I can't reach it right now, nor am I gonna get up because I'm tired. With everybody's signature that visited me, you know, my best friends, who literally were there all the time. My mom never left my side. My dad came. My brother FaceTimed every day. You know, Ricky was there, and Diana was there, and my coworkers came to visit, and Danny came to see me in my house, and my best friend drove for hours to come see me from Miami. So it's just, you know, my family called every day, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles. Feel free to reach out through my social media. I'll put them in the link down below. Look out for the next video that will be 1 week post-op update.